Have you ever wondered what you'd do if breaking the rules was the only way to save a life? On a misty morning deep in Arizona's Coconino forest, Dr. Jordan Price stumbled upon a scene that would challenge everything she believed as a scientist. A tiny, wounded bobcat kitten, caught in old barbed wire, fighting for every breath. The textbook said, "Observe, don't interfere," but one look into those wild, desperate eyes, and Jordan had to make a choice that could cost her everything. If stories of second chances and the courage to care move you, give this video a like. And if you want to follow more true tales of compassion and wild hearts, hit subscribe and join our journey. Stay with us, because what happened next will change the way you see trust, love, and the wild forever. The morning sky over Coconino National Forest was still cloaked in gray, streaked with ribbons of mist that tangled in the pines and crept low across the blackened earth. Dr. Jordan Price, boots laced, backpack slung over her shoulder, ponytail stiff from a half-slept night, moved quickly along the old firebreak. Every step broke the silence with the soft crunch of needles underfoot, every breath a cloud in the chill dawn air. She'd walked this route 100 times, cataloging the after-effects of last year's blaze, documenting saplings, searching for animal tracks. But today, her stomach twisted with something she could not name. It started with a sound, a thin, broken cry, almost lost beneath the soughing wind. At first, Jordan froze, listening. The cry came again, desperate, somewhere beyond the fallen logs ahead. She pushed through ferns and brittle branches, heart thumping, the cold forgotten. The cry led her to a patch of rusted barbed wire half buried beneath pine duff, the relic of some old cattle fence. Caught in the tangled wire, shaking uncontrollably, was a tiny bobcat kitten. No bigger than a loaf of bread, with its wild spotted coat matted, one paw twisted at an unnatural angle, sides heaving with every shuddered breath. Jordan's first instinct was to step back, remember the rules, never interfere, observe, record. The Forest Service and her own department drilled it into every wildlife biologist, especially the new hires, especially the young, idealistic ones who thought they could save every creature. But the kitten's eyes, wide, yellow-green, feral but pleading, locked on hers, and something ancient and fierce rose inside her. She crouched, whispering low, "Easy now. Shh. I'm not going to hurt you." The kitten tried to back away, but the barbed wire bit deeper, a thin line of blood welling on its shoulder. Jordan fumbled in her pack for leather gloves, cursing softly, then pulled out wire cutters and a faded blue towel she used for field notes. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong step and the kitten could panic, tear its fragile body even worse. Time stretched and compressed. The world shrank to the sharp stink of metal, the kitten's frantic breath, and the ache in Jordan's knees. Gently, she clipped the nearest wire, freeing the front paw, then wrapped the towel around the shivering body. The kitten hissed weakly, but then, almost shockingly, went limp. Jordan held her breath, afraid the animal had died right there in her hands. But then the kitten's head pressed against her palm, seeking warmth. The towel became a cocoon, muffling its cries as Jordan worked quickly, freeing each leg, checking for wounds. Her hands shook as she lifted the bundle, feeling the delicate weight of the kitten against her chest. She knew the odds. Orphaned bobcats rarely survived. Trauma, infection, shock. It was usually a matter of days, not weeks. The textbook answer was clear. Bring the kitten to a rehab center, let professionals take over, and avoid imprinting. But as Jordan looked at the battered creature curled against her heart, she couldn't walk away. Not this time. She moved quickly back to her truck, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to leap from the trees and call her out. The forest was silent, except for the distant caw of a raven. At her battered old Chevy, she cranked the heat, set the kitten, towel and all, on the passenger seat, and rummaged for her emergency first aid kit. With trembling hands, she dabbed antiseptic on the scratches, checking the tiny body for breaks. The kitten's eyes never left hers, wary but oddly trusting, as if it sensed that the woman before it was the only lifeline in a world suddenly gone cold and hostile. The drive back to the field station was a blur, the radio off, every mile marked by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the kitten. Jordan's mind raced. Protocol, paperwork, consequences. If she reported this, she'd have to justify every minute she spent with the animal. If the kitten died, she'd have to explain her actions to a supervisor who had warned her already about getting too attached. But the alternative, leaving the kitten to die alone in the woods, felt impossible. She named her Willow, after the slender, resilient trees that bent but didn't break in the forest storms. At the station, Jordan tucked Willow into a crate lined with blankets, set a bowl of water just inside, and watched. Willow wouldn't drink. She wouldn't eat the wet food Jordan offered. Only turned her face to the side, too exhausted to fight. But when Jordan reached into the crate, Willow pressed her tiny head into her palm, clinging with all the fierce strength left in her starved body. Night fell, heavy and silent. Jordan sat by Willow's side, heart pounding, the lines between scientist and savior blurring with every moment. The rules were clear, but the reality was not. As she stroked the kitten's head, Willow began to purr, soft at first, then louder, a deep, desperate rumble that seemed to vibrate through them both. Jordan knew the hardest choice was yet to come. Wild or tame, freedom or safety, love or letting go. And as dawn crept toward the window, Willow, the orphaned wildcat, slept curled in the crook of Jordan's arm, the outside world held at bay, for now. Dawn broke slow and pale over the Coconino pines, painting the field station in gold. But inside Jordan's chest, a storm was gathering. She hadn't slept. Willow lay curled in a crate beside the desk, tail twitching, paws tucked close, a wild thing cocooned in blankets and hope. Every few minutes, Jordan checked for signs of distress, breathing, temperature, wounds. But mostly she just watched, lost in the paradox of science and heart. The world outside expected her to follow protocol. Her mind ran through the familiar checklist: observe, record, report, refer to wildlife rehab. Yet every time Willow stirred, every time those wild eyes met hers, Jordan felt the pull of something deeper than policy. By mid-morning, Jordan's colleagues trickled into the main cabin. Dr. Maggie Lister, the station manager, was first, her presence unmistakable, boots stomping, voice sharp as ever. She glanced at the crate and raised an eyebrow. "You found something?" Jordan tried to keep her voice even. "Bobcat kitten. Orphaned. Caught in wire. She's dehydrated. Shocky. Some lacerations, but nothing too deep." Maggie's face tightened. "Price, you know the rules." Before Jordan could answer, the radio crackled. Pete and Clara, two field techs, were on their way in from an overnight survey. The kitchen filled with voices and the scent of burnt coffee. As word spread about the kitten, opinions clashed. Pete, gentle giant and a stickler for rules, was first to weigh in. "Jordan, I know you care, but the protocol's there for a reason. Wild animals don't belong in here." Clara was less diplomatic. "You're risking her imprinting on humans. Rehab's the only option. Otherwise, you're just setting her up to die later." Even Maggie, usually Jordan's ally, hesitated. "If word gets out we're keeping a wild bobcat in a research station, The feds will be on us faster than you can blink. I can call the Wildlife Center in Flagstaff. They can send a tech out today. Jordan felt a surge of frustration. She looked at Willow, who pressed her small body against the crate bars every time Jordan moved away. The kitten refused food or water from anyone else. Only when Jordan knelt close, hand steady, did Willow accept the dropper of glucose solution, her tongue lapping weakly, desperate for the smallest comfort. The other biologists watched, uneasy. Clara shook her head. You're not helping her. She's imprinting. That's how you get a wild animal that can't survive in the wild or live safely with people. Pete leaned in, softer. You know I get it, Jordan. But the best thing, the right thing, is to let the professionals handle this. Jordan bit her lip, torn between reason and instinct. She just needs a few days. She's so weak. If I move her now, it could kill her. Maggie sighed, running a hand through her graying hair. You can keep her until tonight, but I want a decision by morning. That was the compromise, the uneasy peace. It felt fragile as glass. As the day wore on, Jordan's resolve hardened. She researched everything she could: rehabilitation protocols, bottle feeding techniques, stress responses in phthalids. She called a contact at the rehab center, asking for advice without revealing too much. Keep her warm, minimal handling, no talking. Don't let her see your face, the tech said. But Willow, trembling, ignored food and water unless Jordan was there, whispering gently, offering her presence as the only medicine that worked. Late that afternoon, the station grew quiet. Pete and Clara packed up their gear for a new survey. Maggie retreated to her office. Alone, Jordan sat cross-legged on the floor beside Willow's crate, humming softly, letting her voice drift through the bars. Willow's fear ebbed, replaced by something fragile: trust, or the beginnings of it. The kitten pressed her head into Jordan's palm, then, with a shudder, climbed awkwardly into her lap. The small, trembling body curled up, a tiny pulse of wildness and need. Without thinking, Jordan stroked the soft ears, feeling the kitten's heartbeat slow, her purring rising in the hush. Jordan whispered, "You're going to make it, Willow. I won't let anything happen to you." In that moment, her own old walls began to crack, the ones built from years of keeping distance, of believing the only way to do good was to never get close. The sunset bled scarlet across the horizon, and Jordan, still holding Willow, let herself hope. She pictured a world where the kitten survived, grew strong, and one day sprinted back into the forest, free and wild, but shaped by this strange, desperate bond. She knew it wasn't science, not really. It was something older, a story as ancient as the land itself. But reality knocked as night fell. Maggie appeared at the doorway, silhouetted by the dying light. "Jordan, I spoke with the Wildlife Center. They'll be here tomorrow at noon. You need to be ready." The words landed like a blow. Jordan nodded, jaw clenched. But inside, she was already planning. Just a few more days, she thought. Just enough time for Willow to regain her strength. Just enough time for Jordan to pretend she wasn't breaking every rule she'd ever sworn to uphold. After everyone else had gone to bed, Jordan stayed up, feeding Willow drop by drop, coaxing her to swallow, wiping her face with a damp cloth. Willow, finally warm and full, curled up in Jordan's lap and purred, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the dark cabin. For the first time in months, Jordan felt something close to peace. But as midnight crept in, she stared at the ceiling, mind racing with what-ifs. Could she really risk her career for one wild creature? Was she saving Willow, or just fooling herself, buying time against the inevitable? And what would she do? What could she do when morning came and someone knocked on the door to take Willow away? Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, a scientist and a wildcat slept, tangled together at the edge of choice, knowing that in the morning, everything might change. The first slant of sunlight warmed the field station windows, revealing dust motes and the faint trace of boot prints on the old pine floorboards. Jordan woke to the low rumble of purring. She drifted off with Willow curled against her, the kitten's fragile body nestled into the hollow of her arm. There was a strange comfort in waking this way, a primal sense that they had survived the night together, guardian and orphan, linked by something that was no longer just circumstance. Jordan's alarm blared, jolting them both. Willow startled, scrambling to hide beneath the wool blanket, then poked her head out, blinking in the sun. Her wild eyes had lost some of their terror, replaced by watchful curiosity. Jordan smiled. "It's all right, Willow. You're safe." The kitten hesitated, then crept closer, purring again, her nose pressed to Jordan's palm. Every instinct in Jordan screamed caution. Don't get attached. Don't make promises you can't keep. But the boundaries between duty and longing blurred with each soft touch, each gentle mule. Jordan rose quietly, careful not to wake the others. She tiptoed to the kitchenette, poured a tiny bowl of formula, and mixed it with trembling hands. Willow followed, weaving between Jordan's legs, her tail flicking. When Jordan knelt, the kitten nuzzled into her lap, looking up with that fierce, hopeful stare. Jordan bottle-fed her, whispering encouragement. Willow's tiny paws kneaded her thigh, eyes closing in contentment, as if this moment, the taste of food, the sound of a gentle voice, was all she'd ever known of home. Hours passed in a blur of care. Jordan kept her distance when others entered, but whenever they were alone, she let Willow crawl over her, licking her fingers, chasing the shadow of Jordan's hand across the floor. Each time Jordan tried to coax her to drink from a bowl or eat on her own, Willow refused, but with the bottle she gulped greedily, fur dusted with milk. Outside, the station buzzed with business. Radio chatter, the slap of boots, the distant roar of trucks. Inside, Willow grew braver by the hour. She stalked moths that landed near the screen door, pounced on dry leaves blown in by the wind, and scaled the old bookshelf with a determination that made Jordan laugh. Willow's legs, once weak, found new strength. She moved with a clumsy grace, her wild nature surfacing bit by bit. But every adventure ended the same way. Willow darted back to Jordan, pressing close, her whole body vibrating with relief. Some evenings, Jordan found herself talking to Willow long after the others had gone to bed. She shared stories of her childhood, how she'd found solace in the woods after her parents' divorce, how the wild had always seemed to understand her in ways people never could. Willow listened, golden eyes wide, occasionally chirping back as if she understood every word. Sometimes Jordan would laugh, feeling foolish for confiding in a wild animal, but there was comfort in it, a private world no one else could reach. As the days slipped by, a nagging doubt crept in. Was she helping Willow or hurting her? The kitten grew stronger, but so did their bond. Imprinting was a risk Jordan couldn't ignore. She read studies by lamplight, how wild animals raised by humans often struggled to survive, how their instincts could dull, their trust misplaced. Each article left her uneasy. She tried to distance herself, spending less time in the room, but Willow's cries grew frantic whenever Jordan was gone. Jordan's resolve wavered. Was this attachment a death sentence or Willow's best shot at life? One afternoon, as a storm rolled in, Willow showed just how wild she truly was. Thunder cracked, shaking the windows. The power flickered. Willow flattened her ears, then darted under the desk, eyes narrowed, every muscle tensed for flight. Jordan knelt beside her, offering her hand. Willow hissed, claws unsheathing, and for a moment, Jordan glimpsed the animal Willow would one day become. Fierce, untamable, ruled by instincts older than memory. Jordan backed away, giving Willow space. The kitten eventually crept out, tail high, fur bristling. She circled Jordan, then, almost as if apologizing, pressed her nose to Jordan's knee. That night, Jordan sat by the window, rain tapping the glass. She cradled Willow, feeling the kitten's heartbeat against her palm. "Maybe I'm the one who needs saving," she whispered. Willow blinked, then burrowed deeper into the crook of Jordan's arm. The boundaries had all but vanished. The days became a rhythm of learning and trust. Willow's wildness blossomed. She practiced pouncing on paper balls, leapt at imaginary prey, and learned to climb the old pine trunk Jordan set upright in the corner. Jordan kept the radio on, letting Willow hear the sounds of the outside world. Sometimes she carried Willow out on the porch, letting her sniff the morning air, ears twitching at every new scent. Still, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that every moment was borrowed time. She caught herself watching the road for government trucks, dreading the next conversation with Maggie or the rehab techs. One morning, Maggie stopped her in the hall. "You know, Price, that kitten's going to break your heart." Jordan managed a half smile. "Maybe, but it's not broken yet." Maggie's gaze softened, just for a moment. "Just remember, you can't save them all." That evening, Jordan lay awake. Willow stretched across her chest, purring louder than ever. For a moment, she let herself dream. Willow, grown and wild, running free beneath the endless Arizona sky. She wondered if, by loving her, she was giving Willow the tools she'd need, or stealing away the chance for her to truly belong to the wild. Either way, the bond had grown wild, tangled, and unstoppable. And as Willow dozed, safe for now, Jordan knew that whatever came next, their story was already larger than the rules that tried to contain it. By late September, the world outside the station seemed to spin faster, as if Willow's survival had awakened something in the forest and in Jordan herself. The pines were sharper green, the sun gold as honey, the air vibrating with possibility. But inside the research station, a new pressure built, one that was harder to face than tangled barbed wire or a starving wildcat. A pressure that came with whispers, camera flashes, and the heavy weight of public scrutiny. It started with a single photo. Jordan hadn't even noticed Maggie take it. A quick snap one morning when Willow curled on Jordan's lap after a long feeding. Maggie, half grinning, had said, "You look like a Disney princess for bobcats." Jordan rolled her eyes, but the image lingered on Maggie's phone. Days later, Maggie posted it to the station's private Facebook page, just for fun, just to share a rare moment of sweetness after a brutal wildfire season. Within hours, it was everywhere. A volunteer reposted it, then a local news outlet, then an animal rescue page with millions of followers. Suddenly, Jordan's inbox filled with messages from around the country. Is she tame? Can we visit? What's the story of the miracle bobcat? The phone at the station rang constantly. Reporters left voicemails. Animal lovers offered donations. Activists demanded to know why a wild animal was being kept as a pet. Jordan was bewildered, exhausted, overwhelmed. This was not what she had signed up for. By the end of the week, a van from a major network was parked at the gate. Camera crews trailed Jordan as she moved through her routines. Willow, sensing the tension, became skittish, refusing to eat unless Jordan was present and everyone else stayed silent. More biologists showed up, some from universities, some from wildlife advocacy groups, some from government agencies. There was talk of case studies and unprecedented behavior, debate about animal sentience and the ethics of rehabilitation. In a tense meeting, the head of the Forest Service, flanked by state wildlife officials, sat across from Jordan and Maggie. "You need to understand the stakes," the head official said, voice clipped. "If this animal is not properly rewilded, it will set back years of policy. We can't have the public thinking wild animals make good pets, no matter how cute the photo." Maggie bristled, but Jordan just nodded, silent, heart pounding. The story became a battleground online. On one side, people cheered Jordan and Willow as symbols of hope and healing. On the other, critics accused Jordan of risking the kitten's life and her own career for the sake of internet fame. Jordan tried to stay focused, shutting out the noise, but the strain grew. Her own mentors from grad school sent stern emails. "Science over sentiment, Jordan. The world is watching." Meanwhile, Willow's world remained small but increasingly unsettled. She grew bolder in the day, practicing her leaps and stalking shadows. But at night, she pressed close to Jordan, fur spiked with stress. Sometimes she woke yowling, and only Jordan's voice calmed her. The kitten's trust was complete, so complete that Jordan wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Would Willow ever truly be wild again? Or had she doomed the bobcat to a lifetime trapped between two worlds? The field station, once a quiet sanctuary, turned into a fishbowl. Drones buzzed overhead for footage. Strangers knocked on the station door, asking for just a quick look. Even the other researchers kept their distance, uncertain what to say. Jordan felt alone in the middle of the circus. Only Maggie, gruff but loyal, offered a kind word in the evenings. "You're doing your best. Don't let the armchair experts get to you." One particularly difficult night, after a barrage of angry tweets and a scathing editorial in a local newspaper, Jordan sat on the porch steps with Willow in her lap. The sun dipped low, painting the world orange and violet. Willow licked Jordan's hand, purring, eyes half closed. For a moment, everything else fell away. The headlines, the cameras, the endless questions. There was only the hush of the pines and the thrum of a wild heart. But peace was fleeting. That same night, a famous animal behaviorist showed up unannounced, waving credentials and a press badge. He insisted on observing Willow, spouting opinions about compromised instincts and irreversible attachment. Jordan gritted her teeth, keeping her answers brief, fighting the urge to snap. She felt the walls closing in. The more the world watched, the less she trusted herself to do right by Willow. Later, alone in her cabin, Jordan watched Willow sleep, curled in a crescent of moonlight. Doubt gnawed at her. Was she failing Willow? Was she failing herself as a scientist, a steward of the wild? Had she crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? Her chest ached with worry, but also with love, a love as fierce as it was complicated. She picked up her phone and began recording, her voice raw. "I never meant for it to go this way. I just wanted her to live. I thought if I gave her enough care, enough space, enough freedom, maybe she could have both wildness and trust. Maybe she could choose. But I'm starting to realize, maybe I'm not the one with a choice at all." As the recording ended, Willow stirred, blinking sleepily, and crawled into Jordan's arms. In the darkness, Jordan wondered if love and science could ever exist without conflict, if the heart could make peace with letting go, especially when the whole world was watching. By early October, The tension in the air at the field station was nearly electric. Rumors about Willow's future swirled in every conversation, whispered over coffee, muttered during fieldwork. The image of Willow curled in Jordan's lap had gone from viral sensation to a symbol debated in classrooms and courtrooms alike. The pressure was relentless, but for Jordan, every moment with Willow felt more precious and more fleeting. The official word finally came on a windy Monday morning. A formal letter from the State Wildlife Agency, hand-delivered by a stern-faced official, was laid on Jordan's desk. Willow must be prepared for release within 2 weeks, no exceptions. Any failure to comply will result in disciplinary action and possible legal penalties. Jordan read it twice, jaw tight. She felt both cornered and numb. This was the moment she dreaded, but she refused to let panic win. That afternoon, the team gathered in the enclosure behind the station, a space recently expanded with tall fencing, logs, rocks, and pine boughs to mimic the wild as closely as possible. The sky was heavy with autumn clouds. Willow paced along the fence, nose twitching, her wild energy practically humming. She glanced back at Jordan, uncertain, then crept forward, investigating her new world one cautious step at a time. Jordan's heart pounded. "Go on, Willow. This is all yours." For a moment, Willow hesitated, caught between the safety of the human world and the call of her instincts. Then she leapt onto a pile of rocks, tail flicking, and vanished behind a downed pine. The biologists watched, some hopeful, others skeptical. The days that followed became a crucible, a test for both Willow and Jordan. Willow was now given space to roam, to sharpen her claws, to hunt. Jordan filled the enclosure with live mice, released discreetly beneath leaves and brush. At first, Willow fumbled, pouncing too early or freezing at sudden movement. But hunger and curiosity soon taught her the ways of the hunt. One afternoon, with Maggie and 2 visiting wildlife officials watching, Willow cornered a mouse beneath a log, swatted it deftly, then delivered the limp prize to Jordan's feet. Jordan's heart clenched. She forced a smile, ruffling Willow's ears. "Good job, wild girl." Willow's golden eyes glittered with pride, but she lingered by Jordan's side, circling, rubbing against her legs, seeking approval. The officials exchanged glances. "She's showing skill," one admitted, "but this attachment is a problem. Wild animals don't bring gifts. They don't look back." The debate grew heated at the station. Pete argued for caution, fearing Willow would never be able to fend for herself. Clara, always blunt, insisted, "She needs to go. Every day she spends here, the harder it gets." Even Maggie, torn between loyalty and responsibility, seemed less certain. "Maybe you've done all you can, Jordan. Maybe it's time." At night, Jordan lay awake, replaying every moment. Was she doing right by Willow? Or just delaying the inevitable, clinging to the bond that had changed her life as much as Willow's? She tried to step back, spending less time at the enclosure, but Willow noticed immediately. She'd pace by the gate, yowling, refusing food until Jordan appeared. The kitten's distress was raw, but so was the fear in Jordan's chest. How do you teach a wild heart to live without love? The enclosure itself became a stage. One day, a crowd of visitors, journalists, biologists, even a documentary crew, gathered to witness Willow's progress. Jordan swallowed her nerves and watched as Willow chased a squirrel, bounding from branch to branch, every muscle stretched in joyous pursuit. She caught the squirrel, then released it, almost playfully, before bounding back to Jordan, tail high, purring. The cameras clicked. A reporter leaned in, whispering, "What do you think she's feeling right now?" Jordan hesitated, searching for words. "She's learning. but I don't know if she's learning to be wild or just learning to come back to me. After the visitors left, Jordan slumped against the fence, exhausted. Willow pressed close, licking Jordan's hand, her purr loud and persistent. For a moment, Jordan let herself believe in miracles, in the possibility that Willow could choose both worlds. But reality came crashing back at dusk, when the state official returned with a clipboard and a verdict. "Final decision," he said coldly. "Willow will be released in exactly 14 days. No delays, no appeals. Prepare her as best you can." The words struck like a blow, while Jordan nodded, unable to speak. She watched Willow vanish into the shadows, the weight of the coming farewell pressing hard on her chest. That night, the station was silent. Jordan recorded another message on her phone, voice trembling. 2 weeks. That's all we have left. I don't know if it's enough, Willow. I don't know if I'm strong enough either. The wind rattled the windows, and outside, under the stars, a wildcat and her reluctant guardian waited at the edge of a new, uncertain chapter. The countdown had begun, and every moment felt like both a gift and a goodbye. The days after the official verdict passed in a blur of dread and stubborn hope. The clock that had always seemed to stand still in the pine-scented air of the field station now ticked louder with every sunrise. 14 days. Jordan counted them out in her notebook, crossing off each morning with a heavy hand. She tried to tell herself that this was just the next stage in Willow's journey, that this was what real wildness required. But the words felt empty. In her heart, it felt like a countdown to heartbreak. Jordan forced herself to keep her distance, giving Willow more time alone in the enclosure. It felt unnatural and cruel, like denying sunlight to a plant. Each morning she filled the water bowls, scattered live mice and lizards, and then sat just outside the fence, only watching. Willow would call out, a yowl that echoed through the trees, then sit by the gate for hours, tail curled around her feet, golden eyes fixed on Jordan's silhouette. Jordan's hands shook when she tried to focus on her fieldwork, her mind always wandering back to the enclosure and the question that had come to define her. Was she saving Willow, or simply making her dependent? With the separation, Willow grew restless. She paced the perimeter of the enclosure, pressing her nose against the wire, eyes searching the horizon. At night, she sometimes refused to eat, choosing instead to sit by the gate, waiting, as if expecting Jordan to change her mind and come in, to restore the old closeness. The days when Willow had curled up in her lap and purred felt impossibly far away. Now every interaction was colored by tension. Willow's uncertainty, Jordan's guilt, both of them caught in a kind of mourning for a bond that was no longer safe. The pressure from outside was relentless. Every day brought new emails, new phone calls, more experts offering advice. Make sure she chases her own prey. Don't let her see you at feeding time. Don't speak her name. Don't make eye contact. The checklist was endless, and every suggestion felt like another wedge driven between her and the animal she had saved. Jordan found herself growing irritable, snapping at colleagues, waking in the middle of the night to write feverish notes in the dark. She worried Willow would sense her anxiety and become even more unsettled. One evening, a storm rolled in over the mountains, casting the station in shifting blue shadows. Jordan sat inside her cabin, staring at the video she had started recording weeks ago. She rewound it, watching herself feed the tiny kitten, hearing her own voice, so calm, so sure, promising Willow she'd always be there. Now, as thunder rattled the windows, Jordan pressed record again. Her voice trembled. "Willow, I'm sorry, I know you don't understand, but this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I wish I could keep you safe forever. But you don't belong to me. You belong to the wild. You're not mine to keep, no matter how much I want you to be." She paused, wiping her eyes. "All I can give you is the chance to choose. Your own life. Your own freedom. I hope that's enough." She saved the recording, then stepped out into the night. Rain spattered her face as she crossed to the enclosure. Willow was there, pressed against the gate, her fur slicked by the storm, eyes shining. Jordan crouched down, slipping her fingers through the wire. Willow rubbed her head against Jordan's knuckles, purring faintly. For a long moment, they simply existed together in the rain, neither one able to move forward, neither able to let go. The next day, Maggie called Jordan into her office. "I heard you've been fighting with the supervisor again." Her tone was gentle, but firm. "You have to let her go, Jordan. The rules aren't going to change. If you keep pushing, you'll lose more than your job." Jordan stared at the desk, swallowing hard. "I know. But what if she's not ready? What if I've failed her?" Maggie shook her head. "You haven't failed. You gave her a chance. That's more than most get." The final week was agony. Jordan tried to hide her emotions, but Willow could sense her sadness, growing jumpier each day. The enclosure became a stage for their silent goodbyes. Jordan spent hours hiding treats, setting up new challenges. Logs to climb, tunnels to crawl through, scents to track. Willow mastered them all, but at the end of every trial she came back to the gate, always searching for the comfort that only Jordan could give. 3 days before release, Jordan sat on her porch, watching the sunset bleed through the trees. She played back her video, listening to her own voice speak to Willow. The words weighted with sorrow and love. She wondered if Willow would remember, wondered if the trust they'd built would help or haunt her in the wild. That night, Willow waited by the gate until long after midnight. Jordan couldn't sleep, knowing that in just days she'd have to step back completely. She walked to the enclosure, barefoot in the cool grass, and sat just out of reach, silent. Willow watched her, eyes gleaming in the dark, and let out a low, mournful chirp. "You're not mine to keep," Jordan whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind, "but you'll always be part of me." As the dawn approached, the station was still. The storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean. In the quiet, Jordan finally accepted that letting go was the last lesson she could teach, and the greatest act of love she could offer. Release day dawned cold and impossibly clear, the kind of morning that felt too sharp for tears or regret. Frost clung to the grass, glittering along the fence line of the enclosure, while a low fog drifted in, obscuring the tree line and giving the field station an otherworldly hush. Inside her cabin, Jordan sat on the edge of her bed, her hands wrapped around a mug of cooling coffee, staring at the carefully folded letter on the nightstand. 14 days, they had come and gone like a dream, every hour a countdown, every minute etched with the ache of what was coming. She dressed in silence, field pants, old hiking boots, the weathered jacket she'd worn the morning she'd found Willow tangled in the wire. Everything felt heavier, as if she carried the weight of every decision, every moment of tenderness, every rule she had bent or broken for the sake of a wild heart. Out in the main room, Maggie waited by the door, her own eyes red-rimmed and glassy. "You ready?" Maggie asked quietly. Jordan tried to answer, but the words caught in her throat. She nodded instead. Outside, a crowd was already gathering. News vans idled in the parking lot. Satellite dishes pointed skyward. Journalists checked their cameras and scribbled notes, whispering about the famous Bobcat and the biologist who broke the rules. A couple of local school kids clutched homemade signs, "Thank you, Willow," and "Be wild, be free." The air crackled with anticipation and the faint scent of pine needles and diesel fuel. Jordan moved through the crowd in a daze, every face a blur of curiosity or pity. She heard snippets of conversation, arguments about animal imprinting, speculation about whether Willow would run or linger, debates over the ethics of rescue and release. Somewhere in the mix, a wildlife official coordinated with Maggie, outlining the steps: open the gate, let Willow choose, document everything. No one said what Jordan felt in her bones. This was more than a release. It was a public test, a spectacle with no guarantee of a happy ending. As the clock inched toward noon, Jordan retreated to the enclosure, the key to the gate clutched in her palm, slick with sweat. Willow was already awake, prowling along the fence, her golden eyes bright and restless, body coiled with nervous energy. When she saw Jordan, she chirped softly, then pressed her face against the mesh, paws kneading the earth. In that moment, she looked both impossibly wild and heartbreakingly small. Jordan knelt, pressing her forehead to the wire. "Hey, wild girl," she whispered, her voice ragged. "You ready?" Willow responded by pacing faster, tail high, ears alert. It was clear she felt the tension in the air, the strange hush that comes before a storm. The crowd gathered along the far edge of the enclosure, cameras raised, microphones poised. Maggie stood beside Jordan, her hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, you did right by her," she murmured. "Remember that." Jordan nodded, swallowing hard. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing the fear that this moment would be their last. Jordan stepped to the gate, fumbling with the lock. The metal scraped and clanged in the stillness. Willow froze, every muscle quivering. The gate swung open with a soft squeal, its path marked by a patch of crushed grass and the trail of Jordan's boots from 100 quiet visits. For a moment, nothing happened. Willow stared at the open space beyond the gate, nose twitching, body tense. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sudden fluid grace, Willow bolted, sprinting across the threshold, pausing only once to glance over her shoulder. In that fleeting instant, her gaze locked with Jordan's, eyes blazing with something between confusion and gratitude. Then she vanished into the fog, her form swallowed by the trees and the promise of the wild. A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a stunned silence. Cameras clicked, pens scratched. Someone sniffled softly. Jordan stood rooted in place, hands clenched at her sides, fighting to steady her breath. She wanted to run after Willow, to call her back, to gather her in her arms and promise that everything would be all right. But she stayed where she was, anchored by duty and love, knowing that this was the only gift she could give. Maggie squeezed Jordan's arm. She looked back, she whispered. "That means something." Jordan nodded, unable to speak. The rest of the day blurred into a stream of interviews, paperwork, and forced smiles. Reporters asked the same questions over and over. "Do you think Willow will survive? Was it worth it, risking your job for a bobcat? How do you feel letting her go?" Jordan answered as best she could, voice tight but steady. "I believe in her," she said. "I have to. That's the only way this works. For both of us." As the sun dipped low, painting the clouds in streaks of orange and lavender, the crowds thinned. Maggie helped Jordan clean up the enclosure, packing away toys, bowls, and the blanket that still smelled faintly of wild fur and hope. Alone in the twilight, Jordan let herself cry. Not the silent tears she'd held back for weeks, but real, gut-deep sobs that shook her shoulders and left her emptied out and raw. When the moon rose over the pines, she sat on the porch steps, watching the shadows shift along the tree line. She wondered where Willow was, if she'd found a safe place to sleep, if she remembered the sound of Jordan's voice, if she would ever return. Jordan pressed her phone to her ear, replaying the message she'd recorded. "You are not mine to keep, but you will always be my wild girl." For the first time in months, the forest felt both impossibly empty and full of possibility. The gate stood open, and Jordan, heart aching and hopeful, waited to see what would come through it next. The days after Willow's release stretched into a quiet that felt deeper and heavier than anything Jordan had expected. The field station, once humming with the tension of secrecy and the constant presence of news crews, slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The distant whir of a generator, the crackle of radio chatter, boots stomping in and out, and the chirr of crickets at dusk. But for Jordan, everything had changed. Every shadow in the tree line made her heart leap. Every rustle in the brush sent her pulse racing. Each morning, she woke reaching for the sound of a soft purr beside her, only to find her cabin empty and still. Colleagues tried to help in their own awkward ways. Maggie brought Jordan strong coffee and sat with her in companionable silence on the porch, staring out into the tangled woods where Willow had disappeared. Pete offered to take over some of Jordan's duties, just for a week or two if you need, while Clara left a tin of fresh-baked muffins on Jordan's desk with a note. "Hang in there." Even the visiting grad students, who had once gossiped about Willow behind her back, offered small gestures of kindness. A new field notebook, a favorite pen, a warm smile in the hallway. But nothing could fill the willow-shaped space in Jordan's life. She threw herself into work, hiking for miles each day, checking camera traps, documenting fire regrowth, counting saplings. It should have been enough. But even in the heart of the forest, her thoughts circled back to Willow. Was she finding food? Was she safe from coyotes? Had she remembered the lessons Jordan taught her? Or had she already forgotten the odd, gentle human who had once been her world? The field station set up a few trail cameras at the edges of the enclosure and along Willow's likely escape routes. At first, the footage showed nothing but wind-stirred grass and the flash of deer at night. Then, 4 days after the release, Pete called Jordan over in the middle of lunch. "You need to see this," he said, voice hushed with wonder. On the tiny screen, the infrared image flickered. A young bobcat, lean and wary, paused at the edge of the clearing, head lifted to sniff the air. Willow's markings, her torn ear, her dappled coat, were unmistakable. "She made it," Maggie whispered, grinning through tears. Jordan watched the video a dozen times, her throat tight with pride and longing. The next night, the camera caught her again, this time farther from the station, climbing a fallen log, pausing to listen to the night. Willow looked strong, her movements fluid and sure. With every sighting, Jordan's heart eased a little, even as it ached with missing. But as the weeks passed, Willow's appearances grew less frequent. The cameras caught only glimpses, a tail in the darkness, a fleeting shadow at dawn, the flash of eyes in a thicket. Jordan told herself this was good. It meant Willow was ranging farther, hunting, living her wild life. Still, every day without a sign felt like a small goodbye all over again. Nights were hardest. Sometimes Jordan dreamed of Willow, dreams where the kitten returned, nuzzled her hand, purred in her lap. Other nights she woke from nightmares, heart pounding, certain she'd heard a yowl of pain in the darkness. She would lie awake for hours, listening to the hush of the forest, the wind in the pines, waiting for a sound she knew might never come again. Then, one night, something changed. The moon was a thin sliver above the trees, the world silvered and silent. Jordan sat on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea that had long gone cold. A faint rustle reached her ears, almost lost beneath the sigh of the wind. She froze, holding her breath. There it was again. A low chirp, a soft tread in the undergrowth. She stood, heart thudding, and stepped down the porch stairs, every nerve on fire. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, a figure moved, a wild shape smaller than she remembered, but unmistakably herself. Willow. She sat just outside the ring of lamplight, her eyes reflecting green fire, her body poised and silent. Jordan didn't dare speak or move closer. Instead, she knelt on the damp grass, pressing her hands together, tears pricking her eyes. For a long moment, Human and Bobcat simply watched each other across the distance. Jordan's throat ached with everything she wanted to say. "Are you hungry? Are you scared? Did I do right by you?" But Willow didn't come closer. She stood, alert, her ears flicking at every sound, her nose testing the air for danger. She sat for a while, 10 seconds, then 20, then a full minute, her gaze locked with Jordan's, as if weighing the memory of trust against the call of wildness. Then, just as quietly as she had come, Willow slipped back into the darkness, leaving only paw prints in the dew and the echo of a bond that was changed, but not broken. Jordan stayed kneeling long after Willow disappeared, her heart flooded with a bittersweet gratitude. Willow had come back, not out of need, not because she couldn't survive, but by choice. She had returned as a wild thing, strong and free, and that made all the difference. After that night, Jordan watched the tree line with new eyes. Every sound, every shadow, held the promise of another visit. Sometimes the cameras caught a glimpse, Willow passing by, hunting, thriving. Sometimes there was nothing but silence. But Jordan had learned to find comfort in not knowing, to see hope in the space between loss and love. Willow was gone but not lost. The forest kept her secrets, and Jordan, finally, was at peace with letting go. In the months that followed Willow's return to the wild, Jordan discovered a new rhythm, one marked not by absence but by acceptance. She no longer waited every night at the porch, straining for a rustle in the brush or the glint of wild eyes. Instead, she let the forest unfold around her, trusting that what needed to happen would happen, whether or not she was there to witness it. There was a quiet freedom in that, not the relief of forgetting, but the grace of letting go. Word of Willow's story traveled farther than Jordan had ever imagined. Articles were published in national magazines. Blogs debated the ethics of human-animal bonds. And even a major documentary crew requested interviews. Some called Willow a miracle, a living testament to the power of compassion. Others used her case as a warning, arguing that imprinting could endanger both animals and people. But to Jordan, all the debate missed the heart of what had happened between her and the bobcat. This had never been about ownership or control, about proving a theory or breaking a rule. It was about a choice, one only Willow could make. One autumn evening, as Jordan prepared a talk for a conference on wildlife rescue, she replayed the video she'd recorded weeks before Willow's release. Her own face stared back from the screen, tired but resolute. "You are not mine to keep," she heard herself say, voice trembling. "But you will always be my wild girl." For a moment, she let herself remember every detail. The first day she found Willow, The desperate way the kitten had clung to her, the battles with protocol and with her own heart, the electric moment at the open gate when everything hung in the balance. When she finished the video, Jordan closed her laptop and let the quiet fill her cabin. She thought about choice, not just Willow's, but her own. Had she made the right decisions? Should she have handed Willow off to a rehabilitation center immediately, no matter how fragile she was? Or had that extra time, that stubborn refusal to give up on one small life, made all the difference? She would never know for sure, but she had come to accept that not knowing was its own kind of wisdom. Her talk at the conference was standing room only. Scientists, students, and even a few journalists packed the hall, notebooks and recorders ready. Jordan took a breath, steadying herself, then spoke from the heart. People ask me what I learned from Willow. The truth is, it's not a lesson about science or animal behavior. It's about the limits of love and the courage it takes to trust. I couldn't control Willow's future. All I could do was give her a safe place to heal, teach her what I could, and then let her go. The real gift was not in what I gave her, but in letting her choose her own path. The audience sat in rapt silence. Afterward, a young woman approached Jordan, tears in her eyes. "I rescued a fox once," she whispered. "He kept coming back just to watch. I thought maybe I'd failed him." Jordan squeezed her hand. "You didn't fail. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go, even when your heart wants to hold on." The weeks rolled into winter, and the trail cameras caught fewer and fewer glimpses of Willow. Once Jordan saw a flash of her, older now, stronger, eyes bright with wild intelligence, slipping through the snow beneath a full moon. She found Willow's tracks near the old enclosure gate, sharp and unmistakable, a silent thank you pressed into the frozen earth. Each time Jordan smiled, her chest full of pride and something softer, a gratitude that words could never hold. The world continued to debate Willow's story. A panel of wildlife experts referenced her case in a new policy proposal, suggesting new guidelines for handling orphans, more flexibility, more trust in the people on the ground, and a recognition that every rescue was unique. Jordan joined the committee, her voice quiet but determined. "Let's not make it about rules for rules' sake," she urged. "Let's make it about respect, respect for the animal, for the person caring for them, and for the mystery that sits between the two." At the station, new rescues came and went. Raccoons, songbirds, an injured coyote pup. Jordan trained interns and volunteers, sharing not just procedures, but the deeper lessons of her time with Willow. She taught them to pay attention, to listen for what the wild creature needed, and to recognize when it was time to let go. "It's not about taming," she told them. "It's about trust." One afternoon, as she sat outside with Maggie, sipping tea and watching the shadows lengthen across the yard, Maggie nudged her gently. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd followed the rules?" Jordan smiled, her eyes distant but warm. "All the time. But then I remember Willow, sitting on the edge of the clearing, choosing to come back just to say goodbye. That wasn't dependence. That was trust. That was her choice." In the end, Willow's story became a case study, not of imprinting or failure, but of the deep gray area between wildness and love, between holding on and setting free. It was a story about faith, the kind that lets you open the gate, turn away, and trust that, if you've done your job right, what you love will find its own way. As the sun set over Coconino, painting the pines with gold and shadow, Jordan finally understood. The greatest gift we can offer any creature, human or animal, is the freedom to choose their own path, even if it means letting them go. Years slipped past the way seasons turn, so slowly you hardly notice. Then all at once you look up and realize everything's changed. The scars left by the wildfire healed over, replaced by a riot of green, young pines and aspen shoots springing up in the burn scars, wildflowers crowding the edges of the trails. The field station, too, evolved. Researchers came and went. Students arrived with notebooks full of questions, and old-timers told stories of the days when the world watched a wild bobcat and a scientist learn to let go. Jordan's life grew, shaped by Willow's memory. She rose through the ranks, eventually taking charge of the station, her name now quietly respected among conservation circles. Her hair, streaked with silver, marked the passing years, but her eyes still burned with the same fierce clarity she'd carried on the morning she found Willow tangled in wire. On her office wall, framed and sun-bleached from so many summers, hung the photo that started it all. Willow curled in her lap, wild and trusting, caught in that impossible space between two worlds. The story of Willow became more than a headline or a cautionary tale. In classrooms from Arizona to Maine, teachers displayed the image, some talking about animal behavior, others about the messy, miraculous ways that love and wildness intersect. At conferences, Jordan's former students quoted her words, "It's not about taming or saving. It's about trust, respect, and letting go." For many, Willow was proof that rules could bend to make room for compassion, that science and heart did not have to be enemies. Yet for Jordan, Willow's legacy was most alive in quieter moments. She would find herself on the porch at dusk, listening to the chorus of crickets and distant owl calls, feeling the same ache and hope that had accompanied every step of Willow's journey. Sometimes, walking the old fire break, she would see fresh tracks pressed into the mud. Bobcat, maybe coyote, always wild. Each one made her pause, smile, and whisper a silent wish for their safety. Every so often, a story would reach her. A sighting on a trail cam deep in the woods, a blurry image of a scarred but unmistakably healthy adult bobcat, her markings like a signature on the land. Field techs argued over whether it was Willow or perhaps a daughter. The question hung in the air, sweet and unanswerable. Once, in early spring, a young intern raced into the cabin, breathless and wide-eyed, waving a photograph. "Look," she exclaimed, "a bobcat at the old enclosure gate." The image showed a sleek, golden-eyed cat, pausing as if remembering some half-forgotten story. Jordan smiled, her heart tightening and opening at once. "Maybe she's telling her own story now," she murmured. The legacy lived on in other ways, too. Policies changed, not all at once, not everywhere, but enough that field biologists found a little more freedom to weigh their judgment against the rulebook. New guidelines were written that respected the gray areas, acknowledging that every rescue, every wild animal, was a story unto itself. Jordan traveled to conferences and universities, telling Willow's story to rooms full of eager listeners, always ending with the same message. We are not here to control, but to bear witness, to protect, to care, and when the time comes, to let go. Some evenings, she would gather her team, new recruits, volunteers, grizzled scientists alike, around the fire pit, passing around mugs of strong coffee. She told them stories, not just of Willow, but of every creature that had left its mark on her life. The orphaned fox who slept outside her window for 3 nights, the old hawk who returned to perch on the barn after a broken wing healed, even the raccoon who outsmarted every trap they set. Always, the lesson was the same. Trust is the bridge. We build it one choice at a time. Time softened the edges of memory, but not the meaning. Jordan still kept Willow's blanket, old and threadbare, in a drawer. Some days she would take it out, hold it to her face, breathe deep the faded scent of wild fur and milk and earth. Sometimes, late at night, she played the video she had recorded for Willow, her voice younger, shaking with love and sorrow. "You are not mine to keep, but you'll always be a part of me." Each time she felt the ache and the healing, the loss and the gift of having loved something enough to let it go. In the last golden light of summer, a new generation arrived, both people and animals. The woods rang with the high, eager voices of interns, the flash of deer in the brush, the silent grace of a bobcat moving at the edge of vision. One evening, as dusk fell, Jordan spotted a young bobcat, smaller than Willow but with the same bold gaze, sitting at the edge of the old enclosure gate. The cat paused, as if listening for an ancient story whispered on the wind, then slipped into the darkness, wild and unafraid. As Jordan watched, she realized that this was how stories survived. Not in keeping, but in passing on, in the silent choices made in the wild, in the wisdom offered to every new caretaker. The true legacy was not Willow herself, but the lesson she left behind, that every act of trust, every gift of freedom, ripples out, shaping lives and landscapes in ways we may never fully understand. And so, as night settled over the Coconino pines and the world held its breath for whatever came next, Jordan whispered one last promise into the dusk. "Go well, wild one. Wherever your story leads, I will remember."